the Maharal emphasizes this idea. What's keshem? Just like. What do you mean? By there we've got a reason why. The Gemara says, the reason why God created man after all animals, to tell you, if someone becomes arrogant, then we tell him, even a little yitush kalomcha, even the smallest of flies, of insects, was created before you. Who do you think you are? And there's other reasons as well, that man should come to a ready-made world. But here, what's the reason why discuss the halachot of the animals prior to the human beings? So says the Maharal, you have to know something. God created many animals in the world. God created many creations in the world. He created the whole world. But the whole purpose of the world, or the halachot, which are relevant to those creations. That means if God created different kinds of animals, it's for you to apply the halachot of animals to those animals. That means the purpose of creation was the Torah. So until you give me the laws of the Torah, creation hasn't come to its purpose. So therefore, when you also discuss the halachot, you're actually completing the process of creation. Because up to then, up to when the Torah was given, there was no purpose for the animals. The animals were a purpose to observe the laws which are relevant to these different creatures. So that's what Rashi teaches us. Just like by creation, the animals were created first and then man, this is part of creation, the laws. The laws are part of bringing creation to its purpose. So that's why, just like they discuss the animals first, so to here, when it completes the creation process, which is the halachot, it discusses the animals first. So that means we are now today going to discuss halachot which are relevant from extracts which are taken from animals. And therefore, the halachot which we are discussing, that is bringing those animals into the purpose of why God created them. That we should observe the laws which are relevant to them. There's a famous discussion in halakha, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, is the laws of gelatin. We all know that gelatin are extracted from animal skins, sometimes animal bones, and therefore it renders a big problem in halakha whether you can put such an ingredient into food in order to eat it. It's usually used for it's a gelling agent. Yeah? It's unbelievable how the nature of bones or the nature of skin is really, when you turn it into powder and then you mix it together with water, it gets a little bit of its original status of gelling, of becoming one piece. And that's the great thing. You put it into food, it gels out, congeals, becomes solid, solidifies a little bit. And there's other purpose why they're put as well. I'm not such an expert, I'm not a food technologist, but the food technologists know exactly why they put these ingredients. Now, there is something which recently someone asked me to relate to and to try and clarify what would the halakha be. Is something which we call collagen. Collagen is extracted mainly from fish skin. And I thought to myself, they're convincing people to have it because it's good for the skin. They say to make yourself younger, to prolong your youngness.
As well. It's good for your bones.
It's good for your bones, collagen. It's well for the bones. So in order to preserve our skins a little bit and to look fresher and younger, they convince people that this is the right solution. If you take collagen, concentrated collagen, and you have it in any form, then your body will automatically help your skin become young. I thought to myself, maybe the idea is, I'm not a professor, is some geniuses sat together and said, if you put your finger into water for a long time, your finger, the skin wrinkles. No? So they said, oh, if that's the case, look at the fish. It's all day long under the water, day and night. It lives underwater. Anything happens to the skin? Nothing happens to the skin. The skin is as fresh as, you get the salmon from the supermarket, the skin is beautiful. So if that's the case, if we will take that skin and eat it, perhaps it'll help us as well. But I don't know, that's my theory. I said God is, in Gemara Yuma says, someone who was bitten by a mad dog, you give him from Chatzer Kaved of that dog. That means the remedy is in creation. You'll always find different things in creation, like you have herbal medicines. You have some of something, it can help you perhaps with skin. I don't know, maybe, but I was told that the researchers say that who's done research on this product, whether it works or not, it's usually the companies who manufacture these things. That's the information here. You don't get information from outside these but Baruch Hashem, there is such thing. There must be some kind of, there must be in creation a trufa, a remedy for anything any problems we have. What? I'm sure, they need more.
You get the major and it depletes.
Yeah.
Deplete.
Yeah. So why fish skin?
It's not only fish.
So why fish skin? It's cheaper
as well.
You can get it from chicken.
You get bovine.
All right. So I just give a theory. No, I mean, think about it. Maybe I'm right. Maybe. Anyway, let's go back to what we were discussing. We might not get to a final conclusion of this matter, but let me explain how it works.
To prolong the shelf life of tomatoes.
So let me explain exactly how they get a collagen in order to understand the halachic side of things. So let's give a brief explanation. And the truth is, the more I'm learning about how it's done, I'm seeing different kinds of processes. But in principle, is you take the skins of the fish, which usually they're quite dirty, they've got a little bit of flesh on it, so they have to first get rid of it and clean it in a professional way. So there's different processes of the cleaning. Yeah, they can do with acids, you can do with salt water, and they soak it for days and days until they get rid from all their pieces, and then they wash it again until eventually they're left with what's called pure skin, which that's what they need to extract the collagen. Then it goes through another process. They make it into a powder, and eventually that powder they make drinks out of it, or they leave it as powder and they make the customer put liquid on it or load it and drink it, and that's how the collagen is used. So let's first establish, is there any restriction in having bones, skin of animals which are non-kosher? So really at first, we have to make this clear before we even start. Most fish which they use the skin for collagen are kosher fish. It's only a minority, or it's only sometimes they will use something called catfish or other species which may not be kosher. So therefore that's also something to consider if we don't know the exact source of the fish. There's a concept in halakha which is called achrei rabim lehato. That if the majority of use, I'm not saying that's an allowance, because they may be considered, there's halakha, if you've got 10 shops selling meat, you've got 9 shops selling kosher meat, and you've got 1 shop selling non-kosher meat, and you found meat outside the shop. So the halakha is achrei rabim lehatot. Halakha d'oraita. Chachamim made a further restriction of basar shenitalem min ha'ayin. But biblically, majority of shops sell kosher, so therefore the halakha is that the meat, you can presume that the meat came from the majority, and you can eat the meat. But if you went into the shop and you don't know which shop you went into, then there's a concept called kavua. Since there's definitely a non-kosher shop and you did an action of going into that shop, there's a concept called kavua kemechza mechza. Every fixed place that there is considered like a 50-50, and then you're not allowed to have such a meat. What do you consider?
The theory is, because when you went into one shop,
Yeah.
you don't go to 10 shops.
Yeah.
You go to one shop, so that is one shop.
Even though the majority of shops are kosher.
But it's the same
But because you did the action, took it out, it's not applied, you don't apply the rule of achrei rabim lehatot. Sorry?
Isn't it still the same probability? There's still 1 out of 9 you're going into.
You're right. It needs a lot of explanation. But the rabbi tried to explain now to us what exactly the difference is. Since you did an action, you went only to one shop, so you limited it, your action to one place.
It's not the same probability, because that shop is either
But if
kosher or
something
not.
came out,
Yeah.
it came,
It's
might have
50-50.
come over there. The chances
Yeah,
are
but you
10.
only one out of
But
10.
that shop is either
We didn't go
kosher
to
or
all
not
nine.
kosher.
That's one, that's a doubt. That's the doubt.
50-50, yeah.
That's the doubt.
I agree this demands a shiur on its own, and the Achronim spoke about it in length. to try to understand the difference between this and that, but it's halakha, it's undisputed this. So we consider that companies which make these as you found it, or they're going on our behalf into fishing the fish or getting the fish to make the collagen which they want to provide to you. It's as if you send a messenger into one of the shops. I send a messenger to go and purchase me meat. The halakha will be kol kavua kemechtzar mechta. I won't say, oh, it's in the hand of the messenger, the meat now. It's as if I found it. No. So it's debateful, this. Generally, the poskim seem to treat this like rov, you can rely on majority. But let us take that the skin is a non-kosher fish. So let us discuss now the status of the skin of an animal, the status of the skin of a fish, the status of bones of the fish. You know, by gelatin, Chatzkel Abrahamsky discussed this in length. It's an introduction to the Tzitz, one of the Tshuvot of the Tzitz Eliezer. He discussed it, Rabbi Abramsky's, and Rabbi Abramsky, if I'm not mistaken, was a Dayan in the London Beddin. And he discussed this issue of the gelatin at the time, and he wanted to say that the bones and the skin is not the same as the flesh. So there's a discussion being given there. So let me begin with the words of the Rambam. The Rambam writes in the 4th perek of Ma'achalot Asurot, Halakha Yudchet, Ha'ochel mi nevela v'trefa, one who eats from a dead animal, which is a nevela, or a trefa, or an animal which is taref, it's got a certain issue with it that it won't live long, yeah? Trefa, or mi behema v'chaya hatemeim, or from an animal which is non-kosher at all, yeah, a camel, a horse. Mina'or, min ha'atzamot, min hagidim, from the skins, from the bones, from the sinews, umin ha'karnaim, from the horns, umin ha'tlafayim, umin ha'tzipornaim, the paws, nails, של עוף ממקומות שמבצבץ משם אדם כשיחתכו, ומן השליה שלהם, so it means this is not the proper flesh of the nevela, this is not the proper flesh of the animal, it's just the things which are not normally eaten. אף על פי שהוא אסור, even though it's prohibited, הרי זה פטור, says the Rambam. You're exempt from the negative commandment which the Torah says. But you're still not allowed to eat them. שאין אלו ראויים לאכילה, they're not fitting for eating. Bones you can't eat. You tell me now, if you cook the bone a long time, it becomes soft. We're not talking about those kind of bones. You know, bones which are not normally eaten, the skin of an animal. You don't eat it. Interesting, didn't say the skin of the
Fish.
off.
He doesn't speak
Yeah?
about the fish
Talking about
either.
the skin of an animal.
He doesn't speak about the fish either.
I'm getting there. So it says, these are not fitting for eating. So therefore, not only that, en mitztarfim b'basar lekazayit. You know, in order to transgress the biblical prohibition and to get malkut for eating it, you have to have a kazayit. Because anywhere where it says achila, it has to be a kazayit. Only then you'll have the lashes, otherwise chatzi shiur. Do you join in the skin and the bones to the meat? No. You have to have pure meat in order to transgress the biblical prohibition and to get malkut. Okay? The Magid Mishnah, who was a commentary on the Rambam, he writes, what is the source to the Rambam for this halakha? It says in the Pasuk, in Parashat Shemini, when it talks about the animals, Mi besaram lo tochelu. Do not eat from the flesh of these animals which I've just listed you prior to that. Yeah? The animals which don't have the two signs. Mi besaram lo tochelu, don't eat from the meat. Ubnivlatam lo tigau temehim em lachem. So the Torah clearly says from the flesh you shouldn't eat. Says the Torah Kohanim, which is the midrash of halakha on the book of Vayikra. It says in Torah Kohanim, Safra, Mi besaram lo tochelu. Mi besaram, from the flesh, comes to exclude atzamot, gidim, tlafayim. All these things are not part of the flesh, because not eaten. Or the Via Magid Mishnah, also there's a Gemara in Masachet Chulin, Nafkuk Yud Zayin. It says the or is excluded from nevela. So we see that even the skin of the animal, even though the pasuk, the Torah Kohanim doesn't say skin, it says atzamot and tlafayim, doesn't talk about the skin. But the skin is discussed in Masachet Chulin, that even the skin, the leather of the animal, is not something which is eaten. Then we've got the same drasha brought a few pesukim later when it talks about the fish. The same word is used, mi besaram. It says in Pasuk Yud Aleph, Perek Chet, it says in the Pasuk, V'sheket yiyu lachem, talks about any fish which doesn't have fins and scales, napir or kaskeset, sheket yiyu lachem, mibesaram lo tochelu, vet nivlatam teshaketzu. So again he uses a similar expression. Mibesaram, from its flesh, you shouldn't eat. So the Torat Kohanim also makes the rush from this and says, from the flesh you shouldn't eat. What is it coming to exclude? Here, it doesn't say anything about skin. It says, "Mibesaram lo tochelu, velo mina atzamot, velo mina sanperanim." Not from the scales and not from the bones. Doesn't say anything about the skin. Now you tell me, is fish skin edible?
Based on this, yes.
I don't know. I personally don't
No.
like fish.
Yeah, some people do.
But people tell me the fish skin is eaten. And the whole posh restaurants and all of that, not necessarily they get rid of the skin, it depends on which fish. But generally fish skin is eaten.
You can get salmon skin sushi.
Correct?
That's better.
Correct. Yeah. Chicken and fish, people do eat from the skins. Right? I know there's a Chokhmat
Not
Adam
in
that
India,
says,
Rabbi.
I agree with you. And Chokhmat Adam says that you know what, when things get mixed with each other, if it's Haticha Reuya Litkabel, if it's a presentable piece, then even if it gets mixed with 1,000, is ena betela, it doesn't become batel, nullified in halacha. So says the Chokhmat Adam, if the skin is removed from the piece of chicken, which got mixed with many pieces of chicken, he calls it nitla pe'era. The glory, the beauty of the chicken is gone away. I think in our communities, if the chicken is on it, people won't touch it. I know my wife cooks, she gets rid of all the pieces of skin.
Yeah.
So it's a culture difference.
But there's some communities with the
interesting.
skin or the oil and the fat.
The Sephardim
we
seem
saw-
to
we
be,
saw in Prague.
the
We
Sephardim
saw in
seem to be
Prague,
more
With the hair sticking
Oh,
out.
more cleaner, more aesthetic. You want the chicken with no skin.
No,
no.
Ashkenazim call that
No
the
stop
crown
it.
of the chicken.
Oh, when the rabbi when the Torah states those rules, does it mean
Yeah.
can you derive benefit from it, or you
Oh no
can't
no.
eat it for its
We talk
enjoyment?
about eating.
Talk about
Benefit, fadal. Open a whole company benefiting from make I don't know, whatever you want to make, manufacture from skins of animals, no problem at all. The only restriction we have in these, it's all like fats, like chaleb or this yeah.
And even eating for there's no flavour, just eating it, stuck.
Okay, now we're getting there.
Okay.
Okay, you're jumping the gun now. So you're getting to the maskana. Let's first try and understand that. So we've clearly established, and that makes sense why the Rambam doesn't bring, that the skin of the fish wasn't excluded. It's part of the restriction. It's part of the flesh. So now we are stuck. If you've got non-kosher fin creating this, then clearly the skin wouldn't be comparable to the skin of an animal. This would be not patur, you'll probably be hayav if you have a kazait of skin of fish. So now we have to try and work our way in different ways, trying to get and understand how this process, maybe through the process, there'll be an allowance. Now, there is a Bet Yosef. The Bet Yosef, Rabbi Yosef Karo, his book Bet Yosef, brings, the Rama rules it in Shulchan Aruch, in Siman Pei Zayin, when he talks about meat and milk, he brings the words of the great Shibule Aleket. Lived about 700 years ago. He writes the or keva, the skin of a stomach of an animal. Shemolchim, they used to salt it, probably to get rid of all the fatty pieces, just to be left with the skin pouch, like. Umeyabshin oto, they used to dry it up. Umemalim oto halav, they used to fill it with milk to make cheese. And says in the Shibul Aleket, it's mutar, because it's become dry, like a piece of wood. Umeyabshim heve ke'etz be'alma, it's a piece of wood. Ve'en bo shum lachluchit basar, there's no residue of any meat here. It's become so dry. So it says, even though you want to now use it for something, you want to make cheese in it, you want to put the milk in it, so we regard it like a tasteless thing, and there's no problem to use it. And the Rama brings that in halakha. So you'd say to yourself, if that's the case, these skins of fish which we're using will probably go through a similar process. They dry it up completely in order to make it brittle and to grind it up. So it goes through a similar process as the. However, there's a big difference here. So I'm going to start off with one of the explanations. Apart from the Shach and the Rabbi Kiva Eger who state both, that in first instance you should be particular not to do that. But let me explain to you the difference between these. The Pri Megadim writes, there's a simple difference. When we're talking about making cheese, the worry is, it says you took a kosher stomach of an animal, a proper shechted one, and you want to put the milk in there to make cheese. The whole issue there was meat and milk. And that's why it says, since there's absolutely no meat left, then you're okay to do it. But no, it is the same the Shibule Aleket, that if you take a non-kosher stomach, or an unshechted animal without shachita, and you want to use its stomach, then you've got a different issue, not of meat and milk. You've got an issue of isur, something which is properly asur. That, there's no proof from there. And so is the opinion of many of their commentaries, and therefore that Ramad is not relevant to our situation, where we're taking something which is a non-kosher fish, and we want to now use the skin for any use. They were talking about meat and milk issue. So since you're not eating the actual stomach, you worry about any. There's no meat. It's like a piece of wood. So therefore you're allowed to use it. It's like people put in order for renner, for making the cheese. They put a little bit of this keva. So once it's dried like a piece of wood, there's no issue because it's not anymore an issue of meat and milk. Yeah. So that's what the Pri Megadim says. There's a famous Nodab Yehuda, which says this idea which I'm saying now. He clarifies it. He says that's an issue of meat and milk because something which is asur, something which is asur be'etzem, and you dry it up, that's not going to change its status unless, he says, it becomes unfitting for consumption of a dog. Now let me explain to you and take you to a Gemara in Masechet Avodah Zarah. Trying to be as clear as possible, even though very slowly. The Gemara in Avodah Zarah Daf Samach Zayin says like that. It says in the pasuk, "Lo tochlu kol nevela." You must not eat any nevela. Nevela means an animal which died with no shechita. That's called a nevela. Lo tochlu kol nevela. And then the Torah tells us further. What should we do with it? L'kelev tashlichun oto. Give it to the dog to eat. So here we come to a big mahaloket between Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Meir. Let me explain what the argument is. Yeah, there's an argument where it says kol hareuya leger keruya nevela she'en reuya leger ena keruya nevela. It says anything which is fitting for a ger is considered nevela. Was something which is not ra'ui for the ger, for a convert to eat. Ger doesn't mean a convert of what we regard a convert to Judaism. We talk about a ger toshav because converts have to keep the 630 mitzvot like the Jewish people. We talk about ger toshav. There used to be people who came to settle in Jewish settlements. We had to make the condition that they should keep the 7 mitzvot in a noach. And they're considered ger toshav. We have a responsibility to look after them.
Same as a goy.
Yeah? Like ger asher bisharecha titeneno. Sorry?
It's just like a goy, saying that.
Yeah. So a nevela which is fitting for is considered a nevela which is not fitting like now. Let me explain the bottom line. Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Meir have an argument. Yeah? It says like that. Rabbi Shimon holds. Let's start with the most stringent opinion. Rabbi Meir says only on something which already in its lifetime the animal was something which is unfitting for human consumption, only then do we say that if it's not fitting for human consumption, it hasn't got a status of a nevela. Rabbi Shimon holds even an animal which after it died, it could still be eaten. There was nothing wrong with the animal. It just became spoiled afterwards, and it's already not fitting for human consumption. Already you can eat it. Bottom line, what is the argument here? If I've got fish if I've got an animal which after its death it became spoiled and now humans don't eat it anymore, there's a machloket between Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Meir where the restriction of Nevelah moves away since it's not fitting for human consumption. According to Rabbi Meir, if at the time it died it was fitting for human consumption and only then it got spoiled, then until it will be spoiled that a dog can't eat it, you can't eat it either. It still maintains the status of a nevelah, of something not kasher. Rabbi Shimon is more lenient. He holds if at the time, even at the point of death, the animal was still fitting and then it became spoiled and then it becomes spoiled only that humans don't eat it, that's already sufficient to remove the restriction of nevelah.
Spoiled how? What do you mean by spoiled?
What?
What do you mean by spoiled?
Spoiled means that normal people wouldn't eat it.
What, because it goes off or something?
Goes off, correct. Goes off, becomes unfitting for human consumption.
It's already been slaughtered though, yeah?
Yeah, no, not shchita, dies.
Oh, that hasn't-
To a nevelah,
Oh,
yeah, or non-kosher animal, whatever it is. At what point do we say the restriction is removed and now it's something which, is it at the point where humans can't eat it? Or is it at the point when a dog can't eat it? That's the argument between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Shimon.
Rabbi, we say restriction on what? Restriction on deriving any benefit from it.
No, eating.
Okay.
Benefit, you're allowed to benefit. Let's not confuse two things. Yeah, eating. That means if the restriction of nevelah has been removed, then I have no issue of eating it. I'm not eating now something which the Torah restricted me from eating. So that's the discussion here. So now we need to, in order to establish, we need to understand what's the halakha. Do we follow Rabbi Meir? Do we follow Rabbi Shimon? What happens here? It's getting a little bit complicated now, but don't worry, we'll try and come out from this with something clearer. It says like that. The Rambam writes as follows. Achal ochel, it says, basar nevela, שנפסד והביש ונפסל מלאכול הכלב טהור. The Nodab Yehuda brings that the Rambam rules in Ilchot Tum'ah and Tahara, purity and impurity, which is an implication to what's considered edible and not edible. It says that if you take basar nevela, flesh of a nevela, שנפסד והביש, got ruined. ונפסל מלאכול הכלב. That means the Rambam is requiring it that even the dog shouldn't be able to eat it. So he seems to go like Rabbi Meir, says the Nodab Yehuda, that until the food becomes unedible for dog consumption, it's still a nevelah. Only when it comes not fitting for a dog, then will it be tahor. That's Tukman Tumah and Tahara. There's a further Rambam, which the Rambam says in Ma'achalot Asurot in relevance to eating. Listen to this Rambam. Kol ha'ochalim, says the Rambam in the 14th chapter of Ma'achalot Asurot. Kol ha'ochalim ha'asurim, all the foods which you're restricted from eating, eino hayav aleim, you don't transgress the biblical prohibition to get malkut, ad she'ochal otam derech hanaya. You have to eat it in the normal form it's normally eaten. However, if you took fats, says the Rambam, harei shem chai ta'cheleb, you took fats and you boiled it, and then you swallowed it whilst it's boiling. So it means you burnt yourself. Says the Rambam, v'gema'o keshehu ham ad shenichva, until he burned himself. So that's a normal way of eating? You ate it in a not normal way. Says the Rambam, you're not chayav. You only transgress the biblical prohibition if you eat it the normal way it's eaten. Furthermore, says the Rambam, or she'achal ochel ha'asur, you ate something which you're restricted from eating. However, you achar she'yisriach ve'iv'ish ubatel mitorat ochel adam. You ate the food after it got ruined, spoiled, disgusting food. It became ruined. And you went and ate it, says the Rambam, Since normal human beings don't eat the meat in such a state, don't eat the isur in such a state, you're patur, you're exempt. Now pay attention to the word of the Rambam. The Rambam says you're patur. Patur can still mean it's still possibly rabbinically restricted. We'll have to debate on that. But the Nodab Yehuda says, from the words of the Rambam, I seem to understand that the whole reason why you're exempt is because you ate it not in the normal fashion. But that doesn't render the meat not meat. It's meat. You just didn't eat it in the normal way. Do you get what Nodab Yehuda is saying? That means meat which gets spoiled and it's not fitting for human consumption, not dog, human consumption. So that means we're one level before the end. Human consumption, the Rambam is saying, since you have not eaten it in the normal way, because of that you're exempt. So the Nodab Yehuda says it's still in Nevela, it's still biblically restricted. But because you ate it not in the normal fashion, you're exempt. So that means the status of this meat, which is not for human consumption, it's still got a state of Nevela. The difference would be if I somehow manage to revive or make it taste good, according to Nodab Yehuda, it'll be forbidden. Not only that, you can't in first instance, according to Nodab Yehuda, patur, doesn't mean you're allowed to, means you're biblically not allowed to. You're only exempt because you ate it in a weird way. But it's still an Nevela. That means you're still biblically prohibited, according to Nodab Yehuda, even if you eat spoiled food. You take meat from the supermarket, which the date is gone, and it stinks. And it stinks. You take pork, and it stinks. And people don't normally eat it like that. But it's still fitting for dog consumption, but it's not fitting for human consumption. Yet, says the Nodab Yehuda, there's a biblical prohibition. You won't be liable for the lashes because you haven't eaten it in the normal way. Remember this point. That's the Nodab Yehuda's view. In this Rambam, there's three opinions. Nodab Yehuda is extreme. He holds food, fish skin, let's take it, which is spoiled, which is not fitting for human consumption. According to the Nodab Yehuda, Rabbi Cheskel Landa, he holds that there's still a biblical prohibition. And so it seems from the Rambam. He's only exempting you because you haven't eaten it in the normal fashion. I'll go to the other extreme and then I'll bring the middle opinion. The other extreme is the Pri Hadash, Rabbi Chizkiyahu di Silo. The Pri Hadash, he holds differently. He holds, no. The Rambam really is following Rabbi Shimon's opinion. That once food is not fitting for human consumption, there's no biblical prohibition whatsoever. So why does the Rambam say patur and it doesn't say mutar, that you're allowed to have it? Because the Rambam says there's a different issue. Listen to the Pri Hadash, extreme. He says, really you can eat it. Once it's spoiled, it's not fitting for human consumption. The Rambam holds like Rabbi Shimon, that the person can make Baruch Atah Hashem Shakol Yavet Varo and eat it if he enjoys it. If he doesn't enjoy it, then obviously shouldn't make bracha. But he says the reason why you're patur, and it's still there's a slight restriction, is for a different reason. There's a concept in the Torah called Bar Teshaketzu et nafshotechem. Since this is disgusting meat, humans don't normally eat it, there's a different restriction which is applicable to anything. If you eat anything disgusting, there's Bar Teshaketzu. Right? Bar Teshaketzu et nafshotechem. Don't make yourself, I don't know what the English word is, despicable or this. Yeah, that's the word. Oh, Hashem, I don't know. So don't do things which are disgusting. So the Pri Hadash really holds that once it's not fitting for human consumption, it's mutar. So according to the Pri Hadash, you take something and you'll avoid the problem of disgusting. For example, you take that ingredient and you mix it with something with good flavor. So you're not anymore transgressing the Yisur of Bar Teshaketzu et nafshotechem. You'll be okay. All the foods we eat is full of ingredients which are probably disgusting. Yeah, take something like citric acid. Or would you eat it? It's disgusting. When you mix it in a food, you don't feel it. So if you take, according to Pri Hadash, this is not a biblical prohibition. It's only when there's Bar Teshaketzu, if you eat it on its own. That's why Ran says a patur, but you're still restricted. Now, there's a middle opinion, which is the Minchat Kohen, contemporary to the Pri Hadash. Yeah, not only the Minchat Kohen. This seems to be a big bulk of the poskim hold like that. And for Yonah, there's a Mishneh Melech. They hold that yes, they agree with the Pri Hadash that the Rambam follows Rabbi Shimon. That once the food gets to a state of not fitting for human consumption, already the restriction gets removed. However, they don't agree to a Pri Hadash. There's absolute no restriction. It's only because of Balte Shaketzu. They hold that there's still a rabbinical prohibition to have such things. Why? You know the concept of noten tam livgam? You ever heard of such a thing? Something pagum, something which is not tasteful, doesn't taste pleasant, is asur midirabanan. I'll give you an example. I've got a pot which within 24 hours I've used it for something not kasher. And now I want to use it within 24 hours. The halakha is ta'am keikar. Since the pot has absorbed good flavor, now when I'll cook something else, if there isn't 60 times the amount, it gets the flavor from what the pot has absorbed. What happens is 24 hours have passed after the use of the pot, then the flavor inside the pot weakens to the extent that it doesn't give any more positive flavor. That's called noten tam livgam. That's after 24 hours. Now, halachically, the Talmud in Avodah Zarah says you're not allowed to use even if 24 hours have passed, because we're worried you might could use it within 20. That's why we always kasher the kelim. We don't say, oh, has 24 hours passed? Okay, fine, you can cook it. No, because lechatchila noten tam livgam in first instance is also forbidden. So says the Minchat Kohen, says the Mishnah, noten tam livgam, even though this food is pagum, this food is not fitting for human consumption, there's still a further rabbinical restriction to eat an isur which became pagum. In first instance, you shouldn't be eating it. So therefore, you shouldn't be mixing it into your products either, rabbinically. So you've got three opinions here. We've got the extreme Nodav Yehuda, who's biblically prohibited. We've got the Pri Hadash, which allows it completely, so therefore the mixture would allow it. And we've got the Minchat Kohen, Mishneh Melech, Kanfei Yonah, and many Achronim, which all hold that there's still a further rabbinical restriction to mix it into products.
What's the Shulchan Aruch?
What? That's good. All these opinions which I've just mentioned are really after the Shulchan Aruch. The problem is the Shulchan Aruch hasn't given us clear guidelines on this, and that's why it created a big balagan amongst the later authorities. So if we have a clear Shulchan Aruch, there is a little bit of indication to what the Shulchan Aruch may hold, but anyway, it's subject to arguments, right? This is where it's clear. I'm just trying to make you see that a simple machloket in the Gemara, Masechet Avodah Zarah, it's not simple at all. There's many discussions about to get to the bottom line. We'll soon see. Yeah, there's also rules about what to do. Majority follow the majority. So we don't worry. We're not left clueless. We still know what to do at bottom line. Yeah. Now, I've skipped a little bit. Yeah, I thought maybe there's a clear difference between not in tam levgam. When it comes to a pot, not using a pot between you're talking about something which got absorbed inside the pot. So I can understand why the rabbis were concerned and told you don't use a pot which is waited 24 hours because you might come to use within 24 hours because you can't see the actually sur. But to say on something which is disgusting that you make a mistake and confuse it with something which is not disgusting is quite far-fetched. So I thought maybe it's not so convincing, but many Achorim don't hold like that. So I don't know. I marked it as a ha'ara, as a question. Okay, so let's not. Now, so we've actually, majority of authorities would hold that it's restricted to mix this ingredient into our products. Some, like the Nodav Yehuda, hold biblically, majority hold rabbinically, but it still be an issue to mix this ingredient into products, because even though it's not fitting for human consumption, yet still there's a rabbinical restriction of eating something pagum. And according to Nodav Yehuda, it has to be that it's unfitting for dog consumption. very, very hard today to know what's not fitting for dog consumption, fit for human. You go into Tesco's, you see a whole row of dog food with food coloring, food preserve. It looks like human food. They have to write to you, this is not for human to eat. Some of them even, it's not harmful if you eat it. So dogs seem to be quite spoiled today. So you can't really, we're talking about wild dogs. It says HaKadosh Baruch Hu has Rahmanut on the dog. Its digestion is 3 days because the Gemara says everybody hates dog. So the Gemara got it wrong, obviously. Because nowadays, seems to be everybody loves dogs. But in the time of the Talmud, when they had common sense, when they had a proper way of thinking, dogs wasn't a liked creature. People would chase them away or use them as guard dogs or for any use, but outside the home, not as pets. And therefore the Gemara says that they made the digestion of a dog 3 days. That means he eats something, he can feel satisfied for quite a long time because his digestion is very slow. So it's 3 days. Nafkaminas to Tuma and Tahara, to excrements and all that, but we won't go into that subject now. Because everybody pushes away Hashem's soul. And no one will feed it. And that's why I made the digestion slow. Today the dogs are fat. They're getting anything they want. They're treating better than humans. So what's considered not fitting for dog consumption today would be a bit of a problem. Yeah? Because we can be quite lenient. I think most foods people wouldn't feed their dogs with it. So we're talking about wild dogs. Yeah? We're talking about dogs which are in the hefker, the wild, they get used to eating garbage and rubbish and nonsense. Like the foxes today, I would say. Foxes exact. They go anywhere and anywhere. Right. Says that, let's now go in a different direction. If we are stuck here, we need to see perhaps there'll be another way of looking at things. There's a concept which I'm sure you've heard. Panim chadashot ba'u lekan. I can say that about today as well. Panim chadashot ba'u lekan. What does it mean? New face. Something new. A product sometimes takes a change from extreme. Was something else, becomes something else completely. You ever heard of such a concept? So when I heard that concept, I said, let me do my homework. I need to know where it comes from. What is this nonsense? I take something which is forbidden, and now I change it into something else. Oh, now it's got a new color. Now it's got a new shape. I'm going to now eat it. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? No? So we have to see where the source for this is. Can't believe it's too long. We're doing 2 bank holidays. Right? Says Rabbeinu Yonah. Listen to Rabbeinu Yonah. There's a Talmud in Masechet Brachot which talks about the bracha of besamim. Good fragrances, smells. We have to give kol ha-neshama le'aleliyah. We give even things which the neshama enjoy. We give halel to Hashem. We make bracha on besamim. Besamim is one of the things that neshama. So Gemara discusses a certain product which is called musk. I may not be pronounced musk. I don't want to say that name because people might think I mean someone else. But musk, musk, ma mem vav shin kuf. Yeah. The Gemara says min hayahu. Says Rabbeinu Yonah. Yesh omrim. Some say, and it was something which smelled good. Didn't taste good necessarily, but smelled good. Some say shehu ze'at chaya. It's the sweat of an animal. V'hanachon yoter, says what's more correct, Rabbeinu Yonah says, that it's a chaya yedua. It's a certain animal, wild animal, v'yesh la chatoteret batzava. It's got some kind of glands or something on its neck, yeah, which lisham mitkabetz batchila dam. In its lifetime, it gets blood over there, yeah, and that blood turns into this substance which is called musk, a good smell. So it's basically blood which became nice smelly stuff. Obviously, it lost its color of blood, it's lost probably the taste of blood, the texture of blood, because it's going to say it's going like afar. So it's changed. So he's worked it out, Rabbeinu Yonah, that this is what it is. I've done some research and it's even this is known by the Goyim as well.
But Rabbi, is that part of the ingredient that makes the oil or the perfume smell good, or is it the main ingredient? Because it sounds like it's the main ingredient, but really nowadays it's only
It's like you've
one of
taken
the incenses that make it smell good.
Yeah, but here you're actually taking the actual blood and it's turned into something. So says Rabbeinu Yonah, yeah? Rabbeinu Meir, which is the Ramah, Rabbeinu Meir Halevi, he writes, Asur to eat it. Now, we're discussing the Samim, and Rabbeinu Yonah moved on to talk about whether you're allowed to eat it or not eat it. So apparently this was used to enhance foods, to make them smell better. It was used as an ingredient in food as well. So it says, you see, the industry of food was also developed already then, in the time of the Talmud. So it says Rabbeinu Meir is asur to eat it. Why? Mipnei hashash dam. This is blood. Didn't you tell me it comes from blood? You're eating blood. Who cares you're eating a different form? We're eating blood. Says Rabbeinu Yonah, ve'efshar latet tam. Rabbeinu Yonah wasn't quick to say it's asur. He saw people were using it. So he says we have to give a reason. Perhaps it's allowed. So writes Rabbeinu Yonah, perish be'almahu. It's really an extract from the animal. It's not part of the animal. It's not really blood. Now, even though scientifically, originally this was blood, we're not concerned. Why? Let's judge the situation the way it is now. Is it now blood? Ask a child, he'll tell you. Is this blood? Just can you have blood? It was blood, now it's turned into something else. Rabbeinu Yonah runs off somewhere else to try and bring a proof to what he's saying. He says, look, Harei dvash, honey. Im nafal bo chaticha shel isur, if a piece of non-kosher meat falls into the blood, into the honey, en hadvash asur, the honey doesn't become asur. Af al pi she'isur nimuach betoch hadvash. Even though, we talk about, there's no 60 against what fell in. Because the isur, doesn't explain to us what isur we're talking about, falls into the honey, it becomes nimuach, dissolves into the honey. Kevan shederech hadvash, the nature of honey apparently, that anything which falls into honey turns into honey. So if anything which falls into honey turns, I thought it's a preservative. And I said, no, anything which falls into honey turns into honey. Kedvash dainin ale, we treat it like honey. And therefore, even though originally this was blood, now it's something else. So just like by honey, we say even though there was an isur here, but because it became part of the honey, became big happy family, now it's honey. So now, Ikareh Shemo Israel, honey, mutar. Ikareh Shemo Israel, musk, and it's mutar, even though it was originally blood. So Rabbeinu Yonah has found this kind of a source, which the Rosh, Rabbeinu Asher says, don't bring me Rabbeinu Yonah. שאפילו ראייתו צריכה ראיה. He's so disappointed with the proof of Rabbeinu Yonah that he says even his proof needs a proof. That means what he bought the honey itself, where did he get it from? That means I'm happy with your proof, but your proof needs a proof. What do you, Isur falls into honey, hocus pocus becomes honey? So that's Rabbeinu Yonah.
That's where this. That's where it was started then. The strictness between Ashkenazis and Sephardim.
Actually, here you have to be very careful. Rabbeinu Yonah and Rabbeinu Meir were both Sephardi. So you got one extreme saying asur because it's done, and you got Rabbeinu Yonah says mutar. Rabbeinu Asher is an in-betweener. He came from Ashkenaz to Sfarad. He became a big rabbi in Sfarad, but he actually sided sounds a little bit more like Rabbeinu Meir than Rabbeinu Yonah. But the argument was among Sfaradim. Rabbeinu Yonah and Rabbeinu Meir. So we have to be careful here. I love going into these things. I have to see whether they had different ways of thinking. And I don't find the difference between the thinking in Ashkenazi rabbis and the Sephardi rabbis were not so different at all. It's just a matter of learning more deeper and deeper, and you'll see how close the way of thinking was to each other. The environment they lived in may have been different. And therefore, they had to choose sometimes to be more lenient or to be more stringent based on the environment and the necessities which they needed. That could well be. I'm not saying that's not called evolving or anything changing. That's פשוט מאוד. But the way of thinking, Khalila to say that this one thought less and this one thought more, they're powerful, all of them. Rabban Tam, Rambam, geniuses, Ibn Ezra, Balei HaTosfot, they were massive people, Rashi. Okay? You see from the books they wrote, so they slightly differ from each other because of the necessity of the generation. You can see, maybe the yeshivot were more in one place than another place, maybe the way of teaching was different. But the old Gedolei and Geonei Adam, that's the beauty. We come to Bet Midrash, look at through a bookcase, Sfaradi Ashkenazi, Sfaradi Ashkenazi, Sfaradi Ashkenazi. There's nothing. You got the Shulchan Aruch with all Ashkenazi commentaries. You got the Rambam with Sfaradi commentaries. You got this. Everything is together. They're all together. Beauty. And I sometimes enjoy it when I go to speak by Ashkenazi Shul. I like to show them. Look, what the Vilna Gaon is saying is what the Ma'amar Mordechai is saying. What the Eliyahu Rabbi is saying is what the Matei Yehuda is saying. You know what? Great thinkers. And they were thinking alike.
תלמידי חכמים מרבים שלום בעולם.
No, absolutely. Now, let's go further to our discussion. Interesting that the Rosh attacks Rabbeinu Yonah and he says his proof needs a proof. Yet the Rosh himself in his responses, Tshuvot HaRosh, in Ilchot Pesach, and this is ruled in the Shulchan Aruch. I read you out the Rosh. You know what he says? The Bet Yosef and Siman Taf Samach Zayin brings the Rosh. The Rosh wrote his psakim at the back of the Talmud. You see it written on the lines of the Rabbeinu Alfasi, and he wrote a separate publication which was called Shelot Tshuvot HaRosh. It was a compilement of his responses. And his responses, which is quoted in the Bet Yosef, Rabbi Yosef Karo quotes it in Ilchot Pesach, in Taf Samach Zayin, he brings an interesting halacha. He says Agat, Dvash bePesach, honey on Pesach, לא ראיתי אדם נוהג בו איסור משום חששה דעירוב קמח. Apparently, there was rumors in the market that they were adding on flour to their honey, right? Adding flour to the honey, so if the flour is chametz before you add it, then you got an issue. But if flour goes into pure honey, it doesn't become chametz. Generally. So they wanted to enhance or make it a greater volume, so they would put flour apparently. That was a rumor going on. So the Rosh says, I didn't see anybody restricting themselves from buying honey on Pesach. Adam noeg bo isum mishu hashad derukera. Lo raiti. The לא שכיחה. So here the Rosh was also lenient, by the way. Don't worry, the Ashkenazi was lenient. And it says, the לא שכיחה. Because it's not common that people should do such things, because your product will be less valuable if you mix honey, yeah? It's like you mix whiskey with less alcohol. You do, you dilute something. You're not gonna, your customers will eventually know that you're not selling good stuff. So he says, לא שכיחה. וגם, he says furthermore, מתבטל קודם הפסח. Also, even if they did put flour, it becomes nullified before Pesach. How? How does it become nullified? ואם באנו לאסור דבש, if we will say that it's restricted on Pesach because of the flour, we should restrict honey all year round. Because some say, יש אומרים שנותנים לתוכו בשר נבלה. Some say that the goyim put in it meat. Dissolved meat they put into the honey. ומתהפך לדבש. And here he jumps to Rabbeinu Yonah. Look what Rabbeinu Yonah wrote. That even if they do put, it turns into honey and it's mutar because you judge it at the present situation. So too the flour which may have been put before Pesach, it becomes our honey. And now you can Shemo Israel, honey, not honey with flour.
סתירה in the Rosh.
Huh?
סתירה in the Rosh.
Proper contradiction in the Rosh. On one place the Rosh has a go at Rabbeinu Yonah, and then the Rosh goes and uses Rabbeinu Yonah. So the Acharonim, more later authorities, dealt with this contradiction, obviously. It's an obvious contradiction. You ask me if the Shulchan Aruch relates, the Shulchan Aruch actually rules the Salachah in Chot Pesach. However, many have said that really the main reliance of the Rosh wasn't on Rabbeinu Yonah. The main reliance is lo shchicha. It's not common that they should do such a thing. So because it was only a minor concern that some might do it, he borrowed Rabbeinu Yonah's idea. But if he was sure that this was done, Rabbeinu Yonah wouldn't come into the lexicon, wouldn't come into that consideration even. It's only because it's a very, so that seems to be the more accepted answer, yeah? So that's the Knesset HaGedolah says so, and a few more Achronim hold like that. Some want to say that only in a situation where they take something like honey or meat or something like that, they do rely on Rabbeinu Yonah because that dissolves and it can mix well with the honey. But if you take something which was blood and it becomes now something else, the Rosh didn't like that. That's the exact same substance, just changed its form and shape. But it's not dissolved and mixed with something else. So therefore, to a certain degree agrees to Rabbeinu Yonah, but to a certain degree he doesn't agree to Rabbeinu Yonah. So there's many ways of understanding this, as you can see. Now the Chok Yaakov wants to differentiate that there's a difference between musk and honey. By musk, it doesn't turn into something which is permissible, but something which gets mixed into the honey turns into honey, which honey is permissible. So there's a difference already. That's another difference, right? Now, you should know, just before I end off, I won't end off completely the shiur because it's getting late now. The Magen Avraham, when he brought this theory of Rabbeinu Yonah, that you judge by the situation it's now and you ignore what it was before, this concept of Rabbeinu Yonah, the Magen Avraham asks quite a tough question on this idea. The Talmud in Masechet Bechorot says, Bechorot Daf Vav Amud Bet, Halav, the milk you're allowed to drink, chidushu. It's a chidush. The Torah had to give you a chidush that you're allowed to drink blood, even though milk, even though it comes from a kosher animal. The reason for that is not only because of Ever Min HaChai, there was also the Gemara says, Dam ne'akar v'ne'esa halav. Do you know where milk comes from? Next time you have a coffee, I forgot to start. You hear? Thank you. So it says like that. Milk, where does it come from? The Gemara says Masechet Nida, the Gemara says Bechorot, Dam ne'akar v'ne'esa halav. That's why a woman who's breastfeeding usually doesn't see dam nidut, because the blood, apparently, the milk comes from the purest of the blood of a person. It's the purest. It's carrying everything with it, and the babies eat. The milk comes from the purest part of it. So next time you have a coffee, you should know you're having the blood of the animal. You know that Rabbeinu Bachya says, why can't you have meat and milk? He gives some, even though it's a chok. Chok chakakti zera gazarti lecharashut garer acharei. But sometimes we like the Rambam in Moreh Nevuchim to get some little flavor into mitzvot. So Rabbeinu Bachya writes in his book, you know why you can't have meat and milk? Because milk comes from the blood. And when you return the blood to the meat, you're giving molit tva'im ra'im. It says you're having bloody meat. So therefore, you shouldn't have meat and this. I mean, he's using that theory. So the Gemara says, Dam ne'ekar v'ne. Isn't that a similar situation to the musk? The blood becomes milk, and had the Torah not clearly told me Eretz Zavat Halav Udvash or another source, we wouldn't be allowed to drink blood and milk. So says the Magen Avraham, if that's the case, where does the Torah tell us we're allowed to have musk? So what if it's changed to something else? So has milk changed into something else? It's become now white, it's got different flavor. Even though it came from blood, the Torah had to clearly state that you're allowed to drink it. Had the Torah clearly not stated that, we wouldn't be allowed to drink milk. So if that's the case, how can Rabbeinu Yonah be so confident to say that if blood is changing to something else, panim hadashot ba'u lekan? Very tough question.
Because it
Why can't
loses
he
its
say the
flavour.
concept?
How?
Why can't he say the concept from the milk? And apply it?
Oh, you mean Gzera Shava? Or Binyanav?
It's different. One loses its flavour.
Chidushu, because that's what the Gemara wouldn't say Chidushu, there's a Binyanav. This is not a Chidush, it's to tell you everywhere else. This is a Chidush, it's the only milk you can have. Anything else you wouldn't be allowed to have. What did he say?
Because it loses its flavour, the difference.
I understand, but both lose flavors. Both lose texture and flavor. By texture, I'm not so sure the milk is the texture of blood, but it probably is. No, it's
Like
probably
the milk
thinner than
comes
it's It's very thinner
The
than
milk
blood.
becomes drinkable, whereas the blood.
Drink was at one point in history drinkable, yeah. Oh, today they make a special. They don't make any drinks with blood nowadays. You do. They make cakes and they make yeah. So you could push yourself to make such a difference, but the general principle seems to be not like that. I'll tell you what. He'll continue a little bit. Yeah. Says the Magen Avraham. There's another Gemara in Masechet Temurah, which I want you to share with you. Daf Lamed Dav, which Magen Avraham brings as well. It says, perhaps you'll tell me that the Gemara says in Temurah, you know, you got an efroach shenolad mibeitzat trefa. You got a chicken which is trefa. It's got a blemish which renders it trefa. It means if you see it like that, it's got a leg missing, or it's got something. I've told that the chicken with no head managed to survive. Apparently, even laid eggs. You got something which according to halakha